All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see full house here in the Sheikh Zayed. My name is Benjamin Davis. I'm the director of the Rural Transformation and Gender Equality Division here at FAO. We'll go ahead and begin. Her Excellency, Marta Carvajalino, the Minister of Agriculture of Colombia, is on the phone at the moment. She'll be joining us as soon as she can. That's fine, so we'll go ahead and start. So dear Ambassador, Your Excellency, Carla Barroso Carneiro, who's the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Federative Republic of Brazil to FAO and the RBAs, welcome. Mr. Paul Ngara-Cochea, he's the Director of the Sustainable Supply Chains, Agricultural and Food Systems, Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, of the Federal Republic of Germany, welcome. Ms. Marcy Vigoda, who's the Director of the International Land Coalition, our partner in the GLO. Marcy, welcome. Online, Mr. Selim Louafi, who's the Deputy Director for Research and Strategy of the International Center for Research on the Environment and Development, CIRAD, who's also our partner. And Ms. Aichata Kone, representative of the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism of the Committee on Food Security. Welcome. I can see you down there at the far end. So dear all, first I would like to thank really the Land Tenure team and all the partners for organizing this event. It's hard to imagine what goes into organizing a CFS side event. I mean, it seems trivial, but it's actually, you sweat blood and tears in many ways. And so I want to thank all of you for joining with us to organize this event. Because I think we're all here because we believe that land tenure and land governance matters. It matters for identity, for empowerment, for livelihoods, for investment, for the environment, for addressing climate change, and for peace, stability, and security. And the importance of land tenure and land governance is increasingly recognized across all sectors that make up agri-food system transformation, sustainable development. Illustrative of this are the land tenure indicators that have been incorporated into the Rio Conventions to deal with biodiversity, land degradation, and climate change overall. However, and this really is the main reason why we're here, I think, is that there's very little data on land tenure. And for that reason, FAO, the ILC, and CIRAD have come together to work to establish the Global Land Observatory, GLO. And the objectives of the Global Land Observatory are threefold. First, to inform and document the status of land tenure, land rights, and land governance globally. To bring together and strengthen collaboration of land data and monitoring initiatives. And finally, to build awareness on the importance of land tenure and governance for sustainable development and for addressing global challenges. And this is why this panel on land tenure and governance to present and discuss the preliminary findings of the GLO is so important and timely. Two last points I would like to mention. First, we're looking forward to the final technical report being presented at eCard Plus 20, which will be held in Cartagena in February of 2026. The eCard Plus 20 will be led by the Colombian government with technical support from FAO, and I'm sure the Minister of Agriculture of Colombia, Her Excellency Marta Carvajalino, will say more about this, and welcome, Minister, to the event. Finally, interpretation is available in all FAO languages as well as Portuguese. The meeting is hybrid and will be recorded. So let's begin, and we'll start with some opening remarks from Máximo Torero, who's the Chief Economist here at FAO. Máximo.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you very much for your team for organizing this meeting. So, Excellencies, Minister, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues, sustainable management of land and water resources anchored in secure tenure and responsible governance is fundamental to achieving food security, nutrition, climate adaptation, and sustainable agri-food systems, as Ben already mentioned. Globally, nearly 1 in 4 people depend directly on land and natural resources for their livelihoods. And yet more than 70% of the world land remains unregistered or informally managed, according to joint FAO World Bank estimates. In this context, the work of the Global Land Observatory, the GLO, comes at precisely the right time. Understanding how land is owned, used, and governed, and how these patterns are evolving is essential for informed policy and investment decisions in a world facing demographic pressures, urban expansion, and climate stress. The GLO complements 2 decades of international guidance embedded in the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure, land, fisheries, and forests, the VGGT, endorsed by the Committee of World Food Security in 2012. These guidelines have become the global reference framework for countries seeking to strengthen tenure systems, protect legitimate tenure rights, and promote inclusive governance. The GLO represents the first comprehensive global stocktake designed to document progress and gaps in land governance. The Status of Land Tenure and Governance report will be presented at the International Conference on Agrarian Reform and Rural Development +20, ICART +20, hosted by the Government of Colombia in February 2026, and this is the way FAO is supporting technically this conference. This effort is part of the FAO technical support to this conference, and we will continue providing technical support to it. Complementing the GLO, FAO upcoming State of Food and Agriculture, the SOFA 2025, will address the challenges of land and soil degradation, identifying sustainable pathways to maintain productivity, while the State of World Land and Water Resources for Food and Agriculture, the SOLAO 2025, will assess the potential to produce more and better through sustainable resources management. Together, these reports will form a coherent evidence base for policy, investment, and action at all levels. Excellencies, tenure security is not just a legal or technical matter, it is a catalyst for sustainable transformation. When farmers, herders, and forest dependent people can rely on secure and recognized rights to land, they are more likely to invest in soil fertility, plant trees, adopt climate-smart practices, and access credit and markets. Evidence from the World Bank Lands Governance Assessment Framework shows that land tenure security can increase agricultural productivity by up to 40%, while FAO data confirms that countries with clear land rights experience lower deforestation rates and higher resilience to shocks. Despite this, progress remains still uneven. While over 100 countries have engaged with the voluntary guidelines on the responsible governance of tenure of land, fisheries, and forestry, and several have integrated them into land policies or legal reforms, the implementation gaps persist. In many regions, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, formal land registration covers less than 30% of the rural parcels, and women hold less than 20% of documented land rights, despite contributing heavily to food production. Moreover, the lack of systematic monitoring mechanisms has made it difficult to assess global progress. The GLO is designed to help fill that gap by generating comparable, transparent data and analysis that can inform global and national decision-making. It will also contribute to Sustainable Development Goals, specifically Target 1.4, which calls for the equal rights to ownership and control over land, and Target 5.8, which aims to give women equal rights to economic resources and land ownerships. Ladies and gentlemen, recognizing and protecting legitimate tenure rights, including customary, collective, and indigenous systems, something extremely important to take into account when we look at these processes, is not only a matter of justice, but also effectiveness. Where tenure rights are respected, we have greater social stability, better environmental stewardship, and stronger rural economies. Secure tenure encourages communities to restore degraded lands, invest in irrigation, and engage in reforestation, contributing directly to climate mitigation and adaptation goals. There are estimates that restoring degraded agricultural land could yield up to 85 billion in annual economic benefits, but this potential can only be realized if communities have clear, enforceable, and equitable rights to use the benefits from their land. FAO's work on land tenure, together with the partners such as the World Bank, IFAD, UN Habitat, Global Land Tool Network, and the national land agencies, continues to strengthen country capacities, develop fit-for-purpose land administration systems, and promote gender responsiveness and participatory approaches. In conclusion, we must transform the global commitments into tangible improvements into people's tenure security. We must scale up investments in land information systems, ensure that women and youth are not left behind, and integrate land governance into broader agri-food systems, climate and biodiversity agendas. The GLO and FAO's upcoming flagship reports will provide the evidence base. What we need now is political will, coherent policies, and inclusive partnerships to drive meaningful change. Let us work together so that the secure land rights become not the privilege of a few, but a foundation of prosperity, sustainability, and peace for all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Maximo, for those words on land tenure, on the importance of linking land to sustainable development. It's great to hear about FAO's continued engagement and commitment to land, and our commitment to technically support the realization of eCard plus 20 next year. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Ward Ansau, who will present the preliminary results of GLO.
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Ben, as you rightly said, one of the objectives of the Global Land Observatory is to strengthen collaborations and partnerships around data and data initiatives in order to develop a data ecosystem that is solid and broad enough to cover and document land tenure and land governance. And so the objective, and that's what we did through GLO. My objective of my presentation here is, of course, to give you a glimpse of the results and how we document the status of land tenure and governance, but also to show you what an initiative like GLO can bring to the table, what we can do and what we cannot do, and where we need to further invest. My presentation will be organized in 5 main thematics, 5 areas of work that we have developed among many others in GLO. Apologies. The first one is on the data itself. Apologies for that. So the first part of the presentation is on the data itself. Together with Land Portal, one of the partners that have contributed to this report, we did an assessment of the data availability, the data openness, and the data robustness of land overall. Thank you. Let me continue. Sorry for the technical issues here. And what we discovered here is that overall, land data is twice times less likely to be available than other data for other sectors. When we disaggregate that to land tenure, it is actually 3 times less. And when we consider land rights for women, we see that data is actually only 4 times less than compared to other sectors like public finance and public procurement. This lack of data is also reflected in the reporting of the SDGs. Land tenure data in the Agenda 2030 is actually very dire. Only 12 countries globally have reported to the 3 land SDGs. 27 countries have reported on SDG 1.4.2, which covers documentation of land rights and perception of land rights. 49 countries have reported on SDG 5A1, which covers land rights of women in practice. And 91 countries have reported on SDG 5A2, which covers the legal aspects related to women's land rights. The positive note here is that there's a significant increase in reporting lately, mainly related to the investments of some of the custodians, including the gender team here in FAO, but also other partners. An evaluation coming up of the SDGs and adaptations of some of the proxies making reporting easier. But also mainly, I think, the inclusion of land tenure indicators in other global frameworks, as Ben said, related to the Rio Conventions, and mainly the adoption of land tenure indicators in CBD. The second part of this presentation relates to the status of land tenure itself. And a huge amount of work we have delivered for this exercise in GLOW and for this report, upcoming report, because we discovered very quickly that we did not have an idea of the distribution of land tenure systems. We did not have a clue of who owns the world's lands. So legally, states are the main landholders. 64% of the states are the legal owners of the land today. 26% of the land is non-state, and this includes 18% of private land, of private individuals, companies, and 8% of collectives or customary land. About 10% of this land is unknown. The tenure system is unknown. But in practice, what do we see? In practice, the picture changes significantly, and this is mainly related to the fact that state lands may be assigned even permanently to other users, such as leasehold or concessions agreements, but also customary lands under state ownership. And when we take these aspects into account, the state land is subdivided and results in 28% public land, 20% private land, and 42% customary land, again, with 10% being still unknown. I draw the attention of the large amount of customary collective land rights globally. 42% of the land is owned and occupied, claimed by collectives as customary land rights. What it also shows, what these data also show, is that only 35% has been recognized and documented. Or let me turn it the other way around. 65% of our land globally is not documented and not recognized. This, of course, leads to a lot of insecurity. 1.1 billion people, about 23% of the adult population, feel insecure about their land rights, their rights to land. It means that 23% of the adult population feels that they can be dispossessed of their land in the next 5 years. Worse is that these are data from Prindex, and worse that Prindex shows in the various data collection processes that this degree of insecurity is increasing between 20 and 24 by 4%. The reasons for that are, of course, the number of conflicts, displacement and insecurity this causes, but also financial insecurity and the financial shocks that we were affected to the last couple of years that leads to financial stress in households, mainly in middle and upper income countries, with households not being able to cover rent or mortgages. Now that we have an idea of globally what the tenure distribution looks like, we can also start digging deeper by disaggregating these data or by overlaying them with other data sets. And here, for the course of this presentation, I will give you two examples. The first one on women and the other one on customary communities. We have now data, especially provided by the SDGs, but also by other initiatives supported by FAO, ILC, RI, Landesa, and others that have contributed to these results, that now allow us to say what the degree of, or the likeliness is of men and women owning secure land rights. In nearly in 43 of the 49 countries with data for SDG 5A1, men are more likely than women to own or to have secure land rights. In nearly half of these countries, the gender gap exceeds more than 20%. So in this graph here, the green bullet points are the men, the purple ones women, and the vertical bars reflect the gender gap. And you can see here that in many of these countries, about 20%, in half of them, 20% gender gap is been identified. When we look at the legal aspects of women's land rights, we see a very similar image. Among 91 countries that have data for SDG 5A2, 49% have adopted no or limited legal measures aligned with SDG 5A2 on the protection of women's land rights. More importantly, I think, is when data of 5A2, the legal data, is correlated with 5A1, so the practice data, we see that there's a decreasing trend, the line that you see there showing up, meaning that the more land rights are protected in law for women, the gender gap is decreasing. However, the slight slope, so the almost horizontal line, also shows that it is a much more complex mix. The law and adaptation of measures to secure women's land rights is necessary, but it also shows that societal and religious aspects are part of this complex mix of securing land rights for women. Let me come to customary land rights. And here we have combined the tenure data with geospatial data, mainly coming from Landmark, but also from Garnet, and also work that we have done internally here in FAO. And this allowed us to show or to document the stewardship role of indigenous peoples, of customary communities, and of their territories, which are vital, of course, for people and the planet. Customary lands account for 37% of all irrevocable carbon globally. Customary lands, 84% of these customary overlap with key biodiversity areas, representing 33% of the global total. And customary lands also account for 40% of intact forest landscapes. Yet, only 8% of these lands, and remember, they own occupy 42% of the world's lands. So of these 42%, only 8% is recognized and is hence at risk. 60% of these customary lands are under threat. The case of Colombia, and I took Colombia here because the minister is present here, is illustrative of that. Where Colombia's degree of land insecurity ranges at about 32%, we do see that for indigenous communities, campesinos, Afro-descendants, this degree of insecurity ranges between 60 and 90%. But beyond identifying land tenure and tenure insecurity, it is also essential to understand how land is distributed. And here, our colleagues, FAO colleagues from the Agri-Food and Economics and Policy Division have continued and fine-tuned a methodology that was developed by ILC and the World Inequality Lab. What they found was very similar to other results that are circulating, that the distribution of global agricultural land holdings is deeply unequal. The findings here presented is that the top 10% of largest landholders operate on average 56% of the agricultural land. I stress on average. That means that when we take the land inequality degree or rate of countries, we take the average of that, we come at 56%. However, when we take the land in aggregate terms, so the entire land mass, and apply these land inequality methodologies to that, land inequality represents 89% of the agricultural land. On the other way around, the smallest 40% of landholders operates on average about 6% of the farmland, again on average, which in aggregate terms is just above 1%. The methodology also allows or includes landlessness, includes quality of land, and also includes tenure systems. When we take into these aspects into consideration, land inequality increases even further. In 13 African countries where we have data, the top 10% of land holdings, when we take documented land rights into account, shows that the bottom 40% have no land, the top 10% has all land. So when more secure land rights are considered, in this case, private land rights, we can see extreme measures of inequality popping up, a pattern that is evident in about 50% of the African countries. Two invisible trends that I want to highlight for even more. These are large-scale land acquisitions and shareholding. Even though the large-scale land acquisition trend that we were speaking about after the food price crisis has slowed down, we see another land grab mushrooming, mainly in the framework of climate and carbon discussions. The 2022 land grab report warns that current national net zero pledges is requiring nearly 1.2 billion hectares, about the size of all global cropland and far exceeding the first large-scale land acquisition phenomenon. But beyond this, I think it's important to showcase the change in ownership and use, where in the first large-scale land acquisition period, there was a large panel, and this is work from the land matrix, a large panel of actors, especially individual private investors. This trend has now evolved where more corporate and financial companies are engaging in these acquisitions. The land matrix shows that presently, corporate and financial companies account for 70% of these acquisitions, with pension funds making up 51%. 73% of these entities operate on a shareholder basis. And I think this is very important. This does not only affect large-scale land acquisitions, but it is a reflection of what is happening broadly. In France, for example, based on work from our colleagues from SAFER, it shows that corporate holdings represent now 42% of the farm entities, and they manage about 67% of the agricultural land. France is, however, the only country in the world that can trace that can document that through the SAFER observatories and the SAFER regulations. This type of information about shareholding is not visible in other countries because it's not measured. It reflects changes in ownership and use that are increasingly difficult to track and to document by traditional land monitoring instruments that are generally based on physical land transactions. The situation allows, of course, because invisible, for potentially undetected, undocumented and uncontrolled land accumulation. Ben, I'll go to my last and fifth point. The data that we have now gathered and the work we have now done in collaboration with GLOW and the large partners that have contributed to it also allows us now to track and document progress made over the years, and especially since the adoption of the VGTs. The message here is clear, is that progress has been made, mainly at policy level. Policy level at global, but also at national levels. 71 countries, about 36% of the countries, have engaged in land reform processes since the adoption of the VGTs in 2012. Almost 60% of African countries have engaged in land reform. 27, about 38% of those referenced the VGTs and engaged their land reform process in the framework of the VGTs. So significant increase, but significant impact and progress. But what does that mean? And it is while we start digging deeper, not only in the uptake, but what this uptake means with regard to different principles that the VGT is promoting. Here we see that progress remains limited. Uptake of responsible land governance principles remains very limited up to now, as is shown in this graph. In the upper lines, we've evaluated through an assessment of the legal systems and the legal frameworks of 172 countries, that only 20%, for example, have fully incorporated human rights principles in land policies, while 60% do not refer to them at all. Very similar results have been obtained when we look into responsible investment, transparency and accountability, gender aspects related to land, consultations, and FPIC, free and prior informed consent. Very similar results are showing up when we look into large-scale land acquisitions. And here I refer back to the, to the work of Land Matrix. When we look into Africa, an assessment they did a couple of years ago, 78% of the deals, the large-scale land acquisition deals, comply with fewer than half of the VGT principles. 20% showed no compliance. This brings me to the end of this presentation, Ben. Thank you. Just as a concluding comment, progress has been made globally, progress has been made nationally, at least from a legal perspective. There's still a lot to be done to make these progresses and these advancements reality on the ground. And I think that's where the benefit comes from GLOW and other perspectives we do in collaboration. And I want to thank everybody here that has participated to this data and to this report. And we look now forward to further work together in launching the report. Thank you.
Members have reported that the total pledge funding from 21 to 24 is going to come to an impressive $1.86 billion, surpassing the original COP26 pledge target. So this is an achievement 1 year ahead of schedule. And for us as German corporation, it's really key to focus and prioritize land rights for women, youth, and indigenous peoples as a priority to improve their opportunities in agriculture and contribute to global climate, biodiversity, and land degradation neutrality goals. With this strong commitment to land rights, Germany also supports political stability and security worldwide. I think this connection is also very important to us. So, despite shrinking ODA globally and increased public pressure, I think we need to remain committed as donor community to the idea and confirm our partnership in international development cooperation, especially in this issue of land rights and land tenure. So moving forward, we will prioritize mainstreaming land governance into global agendas and decision-making processes. I think, and I conclude here, ICARD +20 in February in Colombia will provide again an opportunity to strengthen commitments on land tenure and discuss necessary indicators and monitoring frameworks. We know that in the long term, secure land rights are a prerequisite for peace and prosperity. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Next, we'd like to give the floor to Marcy Vigoda, who's the director of ILC, who's one of the partners in the GLO. Marcy, please.
Thank you, Ben. Excellencies, colleagues, friends. First of all, I'm told the translation is back, so if you didn't catch that, we do have it again. ILC, as part of the Global Land Observatory, is really proud to have collaborated with FAO and CIRAD in bringing together the data, the analysis, and the perspectives that have informed this session in our collective journey towards equitable and sustainable land governance. I'm new in my role as director, and one of the first things I read before I joined is a new book that I continue to recommend to others, and so I'll recommend to you. It's written by Mike Albertus of the University of Chicago, and it's called Land Power: Who Has It, Who Doesn't, and How That Determines the Fate of Societies. And in it, he writes, and I'll quote, "How societies use their land and who owns that land determines how people live, who flourishes, who falters, and who has a say in what happens next." And we can only understand those things truly with data. The data being presented and discussed today lay out that evidence on who does own land and what the trends are. And it clearly reveals how we are lagging behind in collecting land tenure data. And for the data that we do have, a deep and growing sense of fragility. Too many people still live with the fear of losing their land and houses. Women and young people remain among the most excluded from control over land and resources. And at the same time, the lands most often unrecognized in law, those managed by Indigenous peoples and local communities, are central to our planet's health. These are the lands and territories that safeguard carbon, biodiversity, and forests. The International Land Coalition, for those who don't know us, is the largest and most diverse network working on people-centered land governance, with our membership of 323 organizations in 93 countries, ranging from grassroots movements and NGOs to research organizations and multilateral organizations, including FAO and IFAD and others. And over the last 30 years, we have supported our members to develop people-centered data initiatives. During the 2008 land crisis, ILC members raised the alarm about large-scale land acquisitions displacing local communities. And in response, ILC helped establish the land matrix, which Ward referred to in his presentation, which today tracks more than 7,000 land deals made since 2000. To bring visibility to lands and territories long absent from official maps, the Landmark platform was launched in 2015, 10 years ago. And Landmark shines a light on the collective rights of Indigenous peoples, Afro-descendants, and local communities, documenting how much of the world's land and natural wealth is held and cared for by them, even when not formally recognized by law. Alongside Land Matrix and Landmark, initiatives like Landex, our common monitoring framework, and Allied, which is the Global Alliance for Land, Indigenous, and Environmental Defenders, contribute to data sets that track global commitments, draw on citizen-led data, and drive local and policy reform. Data work, of course, needs to evolve to fill critical gaps and to explore issues such as artificial intelligence. This year, for example, we will pilot indicators on pastoralist land tenure ahead of the International Year on Rangelands and Pastoralists. And this responds to the urgent need to understand better some of the specificities of tenure for mobile communities, and also reflects the reality that rangelands cover half of the Earth's surface. Without data, there is no visibility, and without visibility, no accountability. So if, like me, you agree that we focus on what we measure, we're in a challenging place. We must invest in land data. Reliable, transparent, and disaggregated data empowers citizens, strengthens accountability, makes visible those who are too often left unseen, and provides the foundation to ensure prosperity for people, the planet, and to claim human rights. The spirit of collaboration behind this report truly shows what is possible when international institutions and civil society work hand in hand for the benefit of those who live on and from the land. So in closing, let me commend FAO, not only for the depth of the analysis, but for reaffirming that land tenure is foundational to human rights, food security, climate and biodiversity, gender equality, and peace. Thank you.
Great, many thanks, Marcy. And as Marcy said, we got the interpretation back. We lost, however, the 200 people who were following online, including the colleague from CIRAD who is going to present online. But fortunately, we have Jean-Michel Sourisseau, who is the Director of Art for Development, and art stands for Actors, Networks, and Territories. Is that correct? Okay. The research team at CIRAD. So please, thanks.
I'm happy I wore a shirt today because it wasn't. So it's good. Land tenure is a struggle, and I will do that. Well, so I will just read the text from Selim. So I'm not Selim, but I can represent him. So it's a pleasure and an honor to take part in this side event and to speak on behalf of CIRAD, alongside our partners, FAO and the International Land Coalition. CIRAD is really delighted to have contributed to this preliminary result of land tenure and governance report produced under the Global Land Observatory. This work is both timely and necessary, given the central role of what land plays in agricultural production, economic stability, climate action, and even peace, as it was to be. I would like to share three messages, only three, that this collaboration highlights. First, the value of partnerships. Two, the importance of inclusive data ecosystems. And three, the need to better integrate local actors and knowledge in governance processes. So first, the significance of research and partnership. This initiative really illustrates the strengths of a collaboration between FAO, ILC, and CIRAD, which is a unique partnership bringing together United Nations, civil society, and research community. And it shows that research can play multiple roles, not only on the technical side, which is the first one, but also by providing data and analysis, but also as a facilitator and an honest broker. We can help, we think, to connect people, different actors. We can connect people and build trust and co-produce knowledge that support inclusive and sustainable land policies. When we generate evidences with and for the stakeholder, we also create the foundation for stronger, more transparent, and more equitable public policies, both nationally and internationally. And this is precisely where such partnerships makes a real difference. Second point, building stronger and more inclusive data ecosystems. About data, and now we can straighten the ecosystems around them. At CIRAD, we believe that developing complementary and innovative data is essential to make land governance more transparent and accountable, like I'll say. But that also means rethinking and that counts what counts as data, and the role that research plays in producing and connecting them. We need to bring together citizen-generated data, community data, traditional knowledge, and scientific research to build richer, more reliable, and more balanced information systems. A good example of this is the land matrix, which brings together multiple types of data to track and make large-scale land transactions more transparent. Initiatives like this helps ensure that decisions are grounded in evidences and that accountability mechanisms are straightened. Last point, looking ahead toward inclusive governance and knowledge. Looking ahead, one clear trend highlighted in these studies is the growing recognition that those who live on and from the land must be directly involved, not only in governance, but also in production of data and knowledge. This is very much aligned with the Rio Conventions, which call for greater integration of community-based data to better respond to local needs and to empower local populations. These developments remind us just how crucial this type of partnership is, bringing together the UN system, civil society, and research, to build governance systems that are both sustainable and inclusive, and to make sure that every voice counts. CIRAD will continue to support and contribute to this kind of collaboration, containing scientific rigor with openness to other forms of knowledge. But it's also a call to all of us to continue working together across institutions and sectors to make evidence-based inclusive land governance a reality. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Thank you so much. Fantastic. Yeah, please stay right here. You can't, don't go anywhere. Okay, so the formal time is up, and I'm totally stoked that everyone is still here after all this time. We still have a full house. That's great. We have one more presentation and then the closing. So I would entreat people to hold on just for a few more minutes so that we can hear everyone. Next up, we have Aichata Kone, who's a youth leader from Mali and a member of the Convergence of Struggles for Land and Water in West Africa, and a representative of civil society Indigenous Peoples Mechanism Committee of the Committee on Food Security. Please.
Ok, merci Monsieur le modérateur pour cette introduction et merci de m'avoir invité à prendre la parole lors de cet événement parallèle au nom du mécanisme de la société civile et les peuples autochtones. Il y aurait beaucoup de choses à dire, mais j'utiliserai le temps qui m'a été donné pour aborder 3 points. Premièrement, je suis contente d'apprendre que le prochain rapport de la FAO sur l'état des régimes fonciers et la gouvernance foncière souligne l'importance des droits fonciers collectifs et coutumiers et insiste sur la nécessité de les reconnaître et de les sécuriser. Au Mali, d'où je viens, nous nous sommes mobilisés pour que le gouvernement adopte une loi foncière agricole, ce que nous avons obtenu en 2017. Cette loi crée un régime juridique spécifique pour les droits collectifs et coutumiers des communautés rurales. Au cœur de ces dispositifs, les commissions foncières villageoises, dont mon organisation a soutenu la création de plus de 380 à ce jour. Plus que des structures juridiques, les commissions foncières villageoises sont des espaces de démocratie de proximité. Dans les régions menacées par l'accaparement des terres, par l'agro-industrie et les projets d'extraction, elles rendent le pouvoir de décision aux communautés, ce qui fixe collectivement les règles d'utilisation, de gestion et de transfert des terres. Les femmes historiquement exclues assument désormais des rôles de leadership, transmettent des connaissances et préservent la biodiversité et la souveraineté alimentaire. La mise en œuvre des dispositions de la loi a permis de réduire considérablement les conflits fonciers au Mali. La mise en œuvre de la loi foncière agricole à travers les commissions foncières villageoises est étroitement liée à la promotion de pratiques de gestion durable des ressources naturelles, notamment par la création de terroirs en agroécologie paysanne. Cet exemple montre que la sécurisation des droits fonciers communautaires est un élément clé de la transformation des systèmes alimentaires vers des modèles équitables, justes et durables, fondés sur les droits humains et la souveraineté alimentaire des communautés. Alors que nous préparons la 2e conférence internationale sur la réforme agraire et le développement durable et rural, 20 ans après la première, l'exemple du Mali nous rappelle que la réforme agraire n'est pas un mécanisme de marché, mais un processus démocratique et transformateur qui transfère le contrôle de la terre, de la pêche, des forêts et de l'eau aux communautés, ceux qui en dépendent pour leur subsistance et qui agissent en tant que gardiennes pour assurer leurs fonctions sociales, écologiques et culturelles. Deuxièmement, je voudrais souligner la pertinence de présenter les conclusions préliminaires du rapport de la FAO sur la terre lors de la session plénière du Conseil de sécurité alimentaire mondial. Le CSA a élaboré, négocié et approuvé les directives sur la gouvernance foncière qui reste le document d'orientation le plus complet sur la gouvernance foncière et qui ont été d'une importance cruciale pour nous au Mali. Cependant, la mise en œuvre des directives a été décevante dans de nombreux pays et il est donc important de renforcer la fonction de suivi et évaluation du CSA. Nous reconnaissons qu'il y a eu de grandes avancées normatives et de nombreux engagements des États au cours des 20 dernières années par rapport à la gouvernance foncière, notamment la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones, la Déclaration des Nations Unies sur les droits des paysans et autres personnes travaillant dans les zones rurales et la recommandation générale numéro 34 sur les droits des femmes rurales du Comité des Nations Unies pour l'élimination de la discrimination à l'égard des femmes. Or, la plupart du temps, ils sont restés des promesses non tenues. Nous espérons donc vivement que la CIRAD plus 20 pourra faire des recommandations concrètes afin que le CSA puisse mieux jouer son rôle crucial de suivi et évaluation et de coordination dans le contexte des directives sur la gouvernance foncière et d'autres instruments pertinents en collaboration avec la FAO et les autres agences des Nations Unies basées à Rome. Enfin, en tant que MSCPA et groupe de travail sur la terre, les forêts, l'eau et les territoires du Comité international de planification pour la souveraineté alimentaire, CIP, nous saluons l'initiative de produire un rapport mondial sur l'état des régimes fonciers et de la gouvernance foncière. Fournir des données et informations est fondamental pour parvenir à de meilleures politiques et à de meilleurs résultats pour les communautés en tant que détenteurs de droits. Nous suggérons donc que le rapport devienne périodique et soit présenté au CSA, ainsi qu'aux organes compétents de la FAO sur une base régulière, en particulier les comités de la FAO d'agriculture, de pêche et des forêts, ainsi que le conseil de la FAO. En même temps, il est essentiel que nous, en tant qu'organisation représentant les paysans, les pêcheurs artisanaux, éleveurs, peuples autochtones et la société civile, soyons inclus dans le processus d'élaboration de ces rapports. La question n'est pas seulement celle de la quantité de données, mais aussi celle du type de données utilisées. En tant que personnes et communautés vivant dans les terroirs, nous avons une connaissance unique de ce qui se passe sur le terrain et comment les politiques se répercutent sur la vie et les droits des familles et des communautés. Nous produisons et détenons des données et des informations concernant la situation de la terre, des forêts et des pêcheries et leur gouvernance qui ne sont généralement pas prises en compte dans les systèmes de données standards, ce qui doit être pris en compte pour que les politiques foncières promeuvent la justice. L'Observatoire mondial de la terre de la FAO devrait donc devenir une plateforme participative pour la collecte et l'analyse des données, ainsi que pour la co-création de connaissances et le partage d'informations, tout en reconnaissant la diversité des systèmes de données et de connaissances. En ce sens, nous proposons que l'Observatoire soit doté d'un mécanisme garantissant la participation effective des organisations de petits producteurs alimentaires et des peuples autochtones en tant que détenteurs de droits. Je vous remercie encore une fois pour la possibilité d'intervenir.
Great. Thank you very much, Aichata, for those words. And now, finally, for the closing, I'd like to give the floor to Her Excellency Marta Viviana Carvajalino, who's the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development for the Republic of Colombia.
Muchas gracias. En primer lugar, reconocer que hay temas difíciles para hablar. Los aranceles y la tierra son dos temas difíciles. Y hoy a Colombia pues le ha tocado hablar de aranceles, pero aquí vamos a hablar también de tierra. Y es para nosotros un honor que este tema ponga al centro también de la discusión la conferencia, y quiero agradecerle a la FAO por presentar este informe en la segunda Conferencia Internacional de Reforma Agraria, porque nos va a permitir alentar los debates y construir esa apuesta común, que es el objetivo de la conferencia. Al equipo de la FAO, además, agradecerle, creo que los datos que se han expuesto acá son datos que evidencian la urgencia que tiene la humanidad de discutir el tema, desde las diferentes perspectivas, reconociéndonos en la diferencia, pero creo que sin duda es hoy uno de los temas que la humanidad en su conjunto debe abordar. Y hace 80 años construimos la FAO, hace 80 años construimos el sistema de Naciones Unidas. Quizá hoy nos recuerda la situación del mundo que es importante encontrarse, hablar y dialogar y volver a retomar la senda de la construcción de armonía, de acuerdos, de poder resolver nuestras diferencias y nuestros conflictos en el marco del reconocimiento mutuo, del respeto y del principio de la paz. Y con eso un poco dejar también sobre la mesa que las desigualdades estructurales, que la crisis climática, que la situación de muchos y muchas ciudadanas del mundo frente a la guerra, frente al despojo, frente al hambre, frente a la pobreza, son objetivos comunes de todos acá. Superar esa situación nos ha reunido como humanidad, y creo que en este momento no solo debemos ratificarlo, sino alentarnos a reconstruir el sistema de encuentro de las naciones. Si no resolvemos el tema de la pobreza y del hambre, no resolvemos los problemas de la paz y de la democracia. Si no resolvemos los problemas de la tierra, del suelo, de la biodiversidad, del agua, de la semilla, de la justicia para nuestros pueblos, no vamos tampoco a resolver los problemas de la paz. Y pareciera una sin salida. No hay paz si no resolvemos estos problemas estructurales, y si no resolvemos estos problemas estructurales, no hay paz. Quizás si todos nos ponemos en el camino del diálogo y de la construcción, encontremos el camino más acertado. Está al centro de este debate más de 650 millones de personas que trabajan la tierra. 850 millones derivan su subsistencia de la producción agropecuaria, y muchas de ellas hoy están en riesgo de ser desplazadas, no tienen seguridad sobre la tierra, y seguramente si tuviéramos mejores datos, mejor información y este esfuerzo sostenido de la FAO por analizarlos y por ponerlos de presente, encontraríamos una relación directa entre los riesgos y las amenazas de nuestras comunidades y la situación de violencia y la situación de la tenencia de la tierra, pero seguramente también encontraríamos una relación directa entre la vulnerabilidad de nuestros sistemas agroalimentarios. Y con eso quisiéramos decir, hablar de la agricultura campesina, de la agricultura familiar, de la agricultura étnica y comunitaria, de su relación con la tierra, de la importancia de proteger esa relación de tenencia con la tierra, es fundamental para hablar de la lucha contra el hambre. Acompañamos a Brasil en la Alianza Global contra el Hambre y contra la Pobreza, un esfuerzo mancomunado por el cual puja la humanidad. Y eso nos implica hablar de esto. Quisiéramos que en la Alianza tuviéramos un capítulo de reforma agraria y de la tenencia de la tierra, para que además lo que venimos haciendo, el informe de la FAO, nos pudiera permitir construir puentes comunes. Lo ha dicho usted. En la COP sobre biodiversidad se habló de la tierra y de los pueblos y su relación con la tierra. En la COP de desertificación y degradación del suelo estamos hablando de la tierra y de cómo las comunidades protegen el suelo cuando reconocemos e identificamos esa relación cultural, esa relación que hay entre los pueblos y la tierra. Estamos a puertas de la COP30 en Brasil para hablar del clima, y seguramente hablaremos de la tierra, del suelo, del agua y de la semilla, y de cómo los sistemas agroalimentarios campesinos, étnicos y comunitarios son una respuesta a la situación del clima. esos campesinos, esos pueblos que rotan sus cultivos, que cuidan el bosque, que hacen un uso sostenible del agua, que custodian y protegen las semillas, son quizá la respuesta a un futuro incierto de una humanidad que llega a un punto de inflexión frente a la crisis climática. Eso es lo que tendríamos que discutir, esa es la necesidad urgente que tenemos y esa discusión es la que queremos, junto con este informe que cae a buena hora, llevar a Cartagena el 24 de febrero del 2026. Quisiéramos que todas y todos ustedes, que los estados que hoy de manera unánime han aprobado en el Consejo de Seguridad Alimentaria la segunda conferencia y su discusión como una forma de aportar al comité, al multilateralismo y a la construcción de una apuesta común de la humanidad, fueran a Cartagena y nos encontráramos con los movimientos sociales, con los pueblos indígenas, con los estados, con la academia, con diversas instituciones, porque es la hora de que el mundo entienda que hay que cambiar. Si no cambiamos, no solo la incertidumbre, sino seguramente más guerra, más hambre y más impactos del clima llegarán a todos y a todas nuestros ciudadanos en las ciudades y en los campos. Tenemos una oportunidad inmensa y es que las directrices voluntarias de la gobernanza de la tierra, de la pesca y de los bosques, que recogen la discusión de hace 20 años en Brasil, se pongan frente al contexto actual de cara a la ciudadanía, de cara a nuestros pueblos, bajo la responsabilidad de los estados y del sistema de las Naciones Unidas para construir una ruta integral, una ruta progresista, una ruta por la vida. Hemos llamado a la conferencia Tierra para trabajar, tierra para comer, tierra para la vida, porque en la tierra está la esperanza y el aliento de muchas personas que esperan que desde los gobiernos demos por fin respuesta a un anhelo histórico y a una deuda de justicia. Por nuestros pueblos, por el hambre, por cesar el hambre, por hacer frente a la crisis climática y por construir la paz en el mundo, agradecerle a la FAO e invitarlos insistentemente a la segunda Conferencia Internacional de Reforma Agraria y Desarrollo Rural que junto con Brasil organizamos en las tierras del Caribe, que los esperan con su alegría y con su esperanza para darle al mundo un nuevo aliento por la vida y por la paz. Gracias.